50. And so in the last, a couple of verses before, in verse, let's see, 49, I think. No, verse 48. We had a very important statement and a very famous statement. Samatvam yoga uchyate. That is, that yoga is known as evenness of mind. Yoga is known as evenness of mind. And I mentioned that now because in this verse we're to take up now, 50, there's another famous definition. So as I said last time, whenever in a scriptural text or in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna or in the teachings of Swami Vivekananda, whenever you come across a definition, then know that that is important. So here, if you want to know what yoga is, Sri Krishna is telling us in that short statement, Samatvam yoga uchyate. Yoga uchyate, yoga is known as samatvam, evenness of mind, that calmness of mind. And as I think I mentioned, I must have mentioned in the last class, when going over this verse, Swami Swahanandaji used to often say, Swami Swahananda, I like to say that Swami Swahananda was the multiple choice teacher. That is, he would always give options. He would say, well, you could do this, or you could do this, or you could do that, or you could do that. And so he would always like to give people options. And so he would often say, well, if a bhakta can do this, a jnani can do that, a yogi can do that, a karma yogi can do that. So he would say that the yogi makes a decision that I'm not going to allow anything to disturb my mind. I'm going to keep the mind calm under all circumstances. And so that is yoga. Samatvam yoga uchyate. Yoga is known as calmness of mind. And so now we come to verse 50, which says, Buddhi yukto jahati ha ubhe sukrita dushkrite tasmad yogaya yujyasva yoga karma sukhaushalam. So buddhi yukto jahati ha ubhe sukrita dushkrite. Endowed with buddhi yukto, endowed with this wisdom, jahati ha ubhe sukrita dushkrite. One conquers even here both good and evil. So endowed with this wisdom which I have taught you, O Arjuna, or which I am in the process of teaching you, one overcomes both good and evil, even here, meaning in this life itself. It's not like in some religions where you die and then you get blessedness. Even here you go beyond good and evil. By following this wisdom which I am teaching. Tasmad yogaya yujyasva. Therefore, join yourself to this yoga. Engage yourself in yoga. Yoga karmasu kaushalam. Because yoga is skillfulness in work. So before he said savatvam yoga uchyate, yoga is known as evenness of mind in all circumstances. Here he says that yoga is skillfulness in work. So another definition. And this one is a stranger definition because we can understand that a yogi tries to always remain unperturbed by anything that happens in life, always to remain unperturbed. But here, this also is a definition that yoga is skillfulness in work. Well, we know many people who are skillful at work and they're not yogis at all. People who are good carpenters, people who are good writers, people who are good managers, people who are good researchers, people who are good sports players, people who have extraordinary skills in different things, but they're not yogis. So how could yoga be skillfulness in work? But here we have to understand what he means by skillfulness in work. He's already said in verse 47 in this chapter that we went over last time, he said that very famous verse, Karmanyevadhikaraste ma paleshu kadachana, that yours is the right to the work alone, not to the fruits of the action. And so here skillfulness in work means one who knows how to engage in work with full attention, with full dedication, with full concentration, doing the work properly, but without attachment to the fruits of action. So that's what skillfulness in work means here. And that is, again, a definition. Yoga is skillfulness in work. So again, skillfulness here doesn't mean just that you are good at doing what you're doing. Lots of people are that and who are not anywhere close to being yogis. So here, being yoga is skillfulness in work means one who knows how to work in a way that it leads to liberation. So that work leads to liberation, not to further bondage. One of the peculiarities of work, any kind of work, whether it's sweeping the floor, washing dishes, experimenting in nuclear physics or whatever, whatever the work is that work tends to bind us because of our expectations, because of our fears, our desires, our likes and dislikes. We get all involved in our work, and work tends to just complicate, get more and more complicated. We have a simple wish to go eat an ice cream cone, and so we go to the drugstore to buy an ice cream cone. And there we find that there's an accident along the way. The traffic is heavy. We can't get out of the traffic. And then we finally get to the drugstore and we find that they're out of ice cream cones. And then we realize that, oh, my time is up. I've got to be back home because someone is coming to see me. And just one thing leads to another. Just a simple thing we want to do. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with going to get an ice cream cone. That's not that there's something wrong with that. No, that's a perfectly innocent action. It's just that work tends to lead to complication. And complication leads to frustration. Frustration leads to anger, and so many reactions within us. By the time we just thought, I'll just drive down to the store, get an ice cream cone, come back, and then I can relax eating my ice cream cone. And one thing led to another. And by the time it's over, we're so frustrated and nervous and upset and everything with everything going wrong that what was the use? So that's true of anything, any action that we do. It has the potential, though sometimes things do go smoothly. Oftentimes they do go smoothly. But sometimes a simple thing leads to all kinds of complications. So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't engage in action just because it leads to complication. It means that we have to learn skillfulness in work so that no matter what happens, my mind remains free. So that I'm doing the work because the work is there to be done. And whatever happens, I'm ready to accept that and to deal with it. Because I am here to do the work. I'm not thinking that let me get my ice cream cone so I can sit at home and relax and nobody's going to bother me and I don't want to hear from anybody, don't want to see anybody, just want to eat my ice cream cone in peace. No, whatever I do it with skillfulness, knowing that, as I said in the previous class, when talking about thine is the right to work alone, not to the fruits of action, we remember the words of Swami Atmarupanandaji to me, that he said in front of me, that it's not what you do in life that's important, it's who you are becoming through the doing that's important. And so in everything that we do, there's an opportunity to become a better person. An opportunity to become a better person, either by learning to focus the mind and be attentive to what we're doing, so we gain power of mind by paying attention, or by doing something unselfishly and increasing our ability to think of others rather than think of myself, or just to forget self and just do the work because it's there. Learning through the work, learning patience. Through the work, when bad things happen because of the circumstances and things, people causing problems or insulting me or whatever, learning patience, learning to keep the mind quiet. And so in everything that we do, learning to do the work in such a way that it leads to my spiritual development. And so that is karmasu kaushalam. Yoga karmasu kaushalam. Yoga is karmasu, in works, kaushalam, skillfulness. So yoga is skillfulness in works, or in work. In the Sanskrit, it is plural, in works. but we would generally say in English in work. So learning to do work with that attitude. How is this affecting me? If I'm becoming so upset by doing work, then what good is that doing to me? Yes, it may be something I have to do, I can't get out of doing, and yet it's having a bad effect on me. And to some extent, we, in our beginning many years of spiritual life, we can't avoid that, because it's just, we can't control our emotions and our reactions and things. But we have to know that that's where I'm going. I'm learning to control my reactions so that whatever happens, I react in an appropriate manner. There's a song, I don't know Gujarati, and so I don't know the Gujarati lyrics, of a song by a Gujarati saint, Narasimha Mehta. And in the song, there's a line where he says that the good person never thinks that they have done something good. The good person never thinks that they have done anything good. Now, one interpretation of that would be, well, because the good person is humble, and so they think, oh, I'm no good. I can't do anything good because I'm no good, and so no, that's not humility. Humility means being transparent, and so the good person never thinks that they have done something good, because the good person can't do anything else. The good person helps somebody, and you think, oh, they're such a good person. Look, they helped so-and-so. And you ask you say that to the person himself and say, oh, you're such a good person, you helped so-and-so. Then that person, if they're truly good, deeply good, they think, no, what else would I do? Somebody needed help and I was there, so of course I helped them. What else am I going to do? So they don't think, oh, I'm so good that I helped somebody. No, what else are you going to do? And so in work, learning to do it with skillfulness means learning to do the appropriate thing in every moment with everything that we do, and learning to control my reactions, so that I can join this with verse 48, that yoga is skillfulness in work and yoga is even-mindedness. So maintaining that even-mindedness in the midst of all action is part of the skillfulness in work, as well as not being attached to the fruits of the action, but just to the action itself. So that if I'm successful or if the work fails, my mind is even. If the work comes out good, if it doesn't come out good, my mind is even. Because everything is, the value in everything is in the experience and in the effect on my character. And the effect on my character will always be good if I maintain evenness of mind and don't react negatively to circumstances. So the running translation goes, endowed with this wisdom, one gets both good and evil even here, or one gets rid of both good and evil even here. Therefore, take to yoga. Yoga is skill in work. So then we come to verse 51. Karmajam buddhiyuktahi phalam tyaktva manishinaha janma bandha vinirmukta padam gacchanthyanamayam. So that means that the buddhiyukta manishinaha, manishinaha means the wise people who are buddhiyukta. That is, wise people who are joined to this yoga, yoga of wisdom, buddhiyukta. Karmajam phalam tyaktva. The wise people who are joined to this wisdom which I am teaching, having renounced the fruits of action which are born of karma. That is, every action is born out of karma, and it gives rise to more karma. So having renounced the results of action which are born of karma, Janma bandha vinirmukta padam gacchanthyanamayam. Having become freed from birth, the bondage of birth. Having become freed from the bondage of birth, which means freed from samsara, freed from the necessity to be born. Padam gacchanthyanamayam. They attain to that abode which is niramaya, which is free of evil. So the running translation goes, endowed with wisdom, giving up the fruit resulting from action, attaining self-realization, and freed from the bondage of birth, meaning freed from the bondage of rebirth. Verily, they go to that abode which is free from evil. So first, giving up the fruit resulting from action. That, again, it goes back to verse 47, that ours is the right to the action, not to the fruits of action. And so again, it doesn't mean that when the fruits come to you for the action, that the actual fruits that you throw them away. No, it means that the good and bad come to you, that's going to come, but you're not attached to that. And so again, as I said, it doesn't mean that when the boss gives you the paycheck that you say, no, I don't want it because I'm rid of the fruits of action. No, the boss gives you the paycheck, but you know that is not the important part of the work. The important part of the work is who I'm becoming through the work. When we die, we can't take any of those paychecks with us. But what we do take with us is who we have become. That is ours, and that alone is ours. Our husbands and wives are not ours. Our children are not ours. Our parents are not ours, because we can't take them with us. Our house is not ours. Our car is not ours. Our position in life is not ours. Our name and fame is not ours, because that also dies with us. But what is ours is who we are. That is the quality of our being. And that we get by skillfulness in work, and that we get by evenness in the midst of work. So endowed with wisdom, giving up the fruit resulting from action, that is being unattached to the fruits of action, attaining self-realization, and freed from the bondage of birth, that is the bondage of samsara. Verily, they go to that abode which is free from evil. As we go to that state, here abode means that state where there is no darkness, where there is no evil, where there is no pain, where there is no suffering. That's, of course, the negative way of describing it. But the positive way, it's also said in the scriptures, is that state which is light alone, which is joy alone, which is wisdom alone, which is infinite consciousness, infinite being, which is outside of time, outside of the limitations of space. And so going to that, then we're freed from evil. So then verse 52 says, Yada te moha kalilam buddhir vyatitarishyati tragandhasi nirvedam shrotavyasya shrutasya cha. So yada te moha kalilam buddhir vyatitarishyati. When your buddhi, when your understanding goes beyond the moha kalilam, the maze of the delusion. So when your understanding will go beyond the maze of delusion, tadagantasi nirvedam shrotavasyasya shrutasya, then you will go to indifference to all that is heard, what is to be heard and what is heard. So the running translation is, when your understanding will get beyond the maze of delusion, moha kalilam, then you will have attained indifference, nirvedam, to what is heard, shrotavyasya, and what is to be heard and what is heard. Shrotavyasya shrutasya. So that is, you go beyond the Veda, you go beyond everything that is to be, everything else that is to be known and to be heard, including the Veda itself. Because you have attained to that which is beyond even the Veda. As Sri Ramakrishna said, the Veda is that which is like, or the scriptures are like a shopping list. Once you have bought the goods on the list, you don't keep the list. You realize that that is served its purpose, and so you go beyond it. And so in this, you have no need for the Veda or any other scripture or any other text, because you have had that which is the reality, which is the aim of all of those things. And so one goes beyond that which is to be heard and that which is heard. Then verse 53 says, Shrutivi pratipannate yada stasyasi nischala samadha vachala buddhis tada yogam avapsyasi. So this says that when you're understanding, Shrutivi pratipannate yada stasyasi nischala, when you're understanding which is perplexed by hearing, that is, by all of the various opinions that you have heard, will rest in samadhi, unwavering and steady, tada yogam avapsyasi, then you shall attain to yoga. So shruti vipratipanna te, here buddhi is understood, your understanding, which is shruti vipratipanna, which is confused by all of the things that you have heard, meaning from the scripture. So all of the confusions you get from study and from hearing the scripture, that you go beyond all of that. When the buddhi, when the mind, the highest part of the mind is established in samadhi, unwavering in achala, samadho achala buddhi. When your buddhi is unwavering in samadhi. So samadhi is that state where the mind is completely unwavering. Right now, when we try to meditate, or do japa, then we try to concentrate on what we're doing. We put the mind there, and then within a second or two, the mind runs away. And then we bring it back, and within a second or two, the mind runs away. So the mind is constantly wavering. Then a time comes, one day, after long practice, when we put the mind, as usual, we put the mind there to meditate, and the mind stays there. And then after some time, again, we lose concentration. But for some time, the mind just stays there. That is meditation as a state. And then a time comes when we put the mind there, it stays, and then the concentration goes so deep that everything else disappears. Only the object of meditation is there living. Then we have attained to samadhi. And so there the mind doesn't waver at all. The mind is fixed. Sri Ramakrishna gives the example of going to the theater and watching a play. He said the curtain is closed, and so people in the audience are talking to each other, chatter going on, different conversations going on in different parts of the theater. So there's all this hubbub, people getting up, stretching their legs, going and sitting down, going over to see somebody else and talk to them, and then coming back to their seat and all of that. People commenting on, oh, what a beautiful sari you're wearing, or whatever it is that they talk about. But then suddenly the curtain is raised and the play begins. Then everyone's attention is fixed on the stage. Everyone, the mind is just fixed. All of the chatter, and all of that ends, and everybody's mind is fixed. So he said that samadhi is like that. The mind normally is chattering away and all different kinds of thoughts going on, and all this noise in the mind. But when we attain to samadhi, then suddenly the mind is fixed. There's no wavering at all. And only whatever we're meditating on, that alone remains. And so here he's not talking about meditating on the flame of a candle or something like that, which is good to learn concentration. He's talking about when the mind is established in samadhi on God. And God alone is fixed in the mind, and nothing else is there. And we feel that we're going into the depths of God through that concentration. Then we will attain to yoga. Then our mind has gone, our mind which has been perplexed by all of the things we're trying to figure out about spiritual life. What to speak of all of the other things that confuse our minds, all of the things in life that we don't understand, all of the things that that don't seem to make sense to us, and then all of the things that we're trying to lead a spiritual life, all of the things we try to figure out about the scriptures. What am I to do? How am I to do it? All of these perplexing things which confuse the mind, which are necessary for us to go forward to know something about these things. But still it's all perplexing. Now at this time, the mind is fixed in samadhi and all of that disappears. Everything disappears. So when your understanding, now perplexed by hearing, will rest in samadhi, unwavering and steady, then you shall attain to yoga. Tada yoga mavapsisi. Then you will attain to yoga. When that is attained, the mind fixed in samadhi on God. So then the verse 54 says, this is a question by Arjuna, the famous question of Arjuna, verse 54. Stita prajnasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava stita dhirgim prabhasheta kimasita vrajeta kim. So here Arjuna Vacha, Arjuna says, Stita prajnasya ka bhasha. What is the speech of a person of steady wisdom? One who has attained to steady wisdom, how do they speak? Samadhistasya keshava, one who is established in samadhi, O Keshava. Stitadhi, one whose intelligence is steady. Kim prabhasheta, what do they say? Kimasita, how do they sit? Vrajeta kim, how do they walk? So what is the definition, O Keshava, of a man of steady wisdom, absorbed in contemplation? How does a man of steady wisdom talk? How does he sit and how does he walk? Now, Madhusudana, this was the translation that's according to the commentary of Sridhara, done by Swami Vireshwaranji Maharaj. Madhusudana Saraswati, he says that the Stita Prajna and the Samadhista and the Stita Dhi, referring to three different conditions of the person of wisdom. So the Stita Prajna is one who is established in wisdom in all circumstances. So that is the generalized condition of the person of steady wisdom, whether they are in samadhi or in the field of action. And the Samadhistasya, one who is established in samadhi at the time of samadhi. How are they then? And the Stita Dhi, the person of steady wisdom, like the Stita Prajna, but he is Stita Dhi, one whose Dhi, one's buddhi, one's intelligence is established. How do they act in the world? So how do they speak? How do they sit? How do they walk? So this is an interesting question, because you would think that when you want to know about the person of illumination, you'd want to know what is their inner condition like, what is their mind like. Well, that is what Sri Krishna has already been teaching, what the state of mind is like, the state of consciousness. But Arjuna asks an interesting question. He wants to know, how do they walk? How do they talk? How do they sit? Etc. What is their behavior like? What distinguishes them from us? And so, as Holy Mother used to say, and Sri Ramakrishna also said before her, that the person of illumination doesn't grow two horns. So it's not that they look different or something like that. But this question indicates that there's more to it than just that. Yes, what Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother used to say is correct, that people seeing Holy Mother, they would often think that she was just an ordinary woman, because they couldn't see what was there. But a person who was deeply spiritual would have seen in the Holy Mother immediately, would have seen a difference. One of my teachers in India, not my guru, but one of my upa-gurus, he was born in Kerala, grew up in Kerala, and his father was a temple priest, and his mother was a very devout woman also. And so they had a shrine in the home. They weren't devotees of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, but his mother had on the home shrine a picture of Holy Mother. And so he, my teacher, as a boy, he asked his mother about the picture of Holy Mother and asked, is she a goddess? And his mother said, could an ordinary woman have eyes like hers? Now, most people seeing the picture of Holy Mother, they wouldn't notice that. But she, because she was undoubtedly a very devout and a devout satika, she could see, even in the picture of Holy Mother, that there was something unusual about her. And so that's something that if we have the chance to live in the company of several highly spiritual people, that's a very rare opportunity. We're lucky if we come across one highly spiritual person, not an ordinary sadhu or anything like that, but highly spiritual, highly evolved person. If we have the chance to live among several, then we begin to see how they are different from ordinary people, and how you can see that difference. You begin to see that, no, there are qualities about them which are quite different from anybody else. When I was in training center back in the mid-1970s, the Swami Saradeshananda, a great disciple of Holy Mother, who was highly regarded for his spirituality, he used to live in Vrindavan, and he came to Bellarmut to stay for 2 months while I was in the second year of training center. And I used to go see him whenever I had the chance. After supper, I would stop in his room to see him. And in the afternoon, I would go to where he would walk in front of the, what's called the trustees building. And I would go to a corner of the building just to watch him pacing in the yard, because I saw such beauty in him. Not Hollywood beauty. It wasn't that he was handsome or anything like that. He was a very old man at that time, but there was a spiritual beauty about him. And I loved just to watch him walk, because there was a beauty just in everything that he did. And so here, Arjuna is asking that question. What is the definition of a person of steady, who by nature rests in contemplation, and therefore whose wisdom or understanding is steady? Oh, that's the commentary. Let me get back to the verse. What is the definition, O Keshava, of a man of steady wisdom, absorbed in contemplation? How does one of steady wisdom talk? How does such a one sit? And how do they walk? So again, he wants to know how it is that they do. And so the next verses to the end of this chapter, 55 through 72, this is one of the longer chapters in the Gita, not the longest, but one of the longer chapters in the Gita. Most are between 30 and 40 verses, sometimes just 20. But this one goes to 72 verses. So 55 through 72, Sri Krishna is answering his question about how the person of steady wisdom, how they speak, how they sit, how they walk, etc. So we'll begin this, and then we'll pick it up again in September. So verse 55 is the beginning of Sri Krishna's answer. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Rajahati Yada Kaman Sarvan Partha Manogatan Atmanyevatmana Tushta Stita Prajnastaruchyate. So Prajahati Yada Kaman Sarvan Partha Manogatan. O Partha, Yada, when one gives up all desires of the mind, Prajahati Manogatam Kaman, when one gives up all of the desires of the mind, Atmani Eva Atmana Tushta, and one is satisfied in the self by the self, that is, in the highest self, the supreme self, in the Atman, the true Atman. When one is perfectly satisfied, Tushta, Atmani, in the self. They don't look for anything outside, because the self is infinite. And everything that they see out here is seen to be just a shadow-like existence within the self. They see that the self is everything, and the self is the reality. Everything else is like a shadow. And so they are satisfied, they delight in the self, and Atmana, by the self, by the mind. When the mind delights within the self itself. Stita prajnastaruchyate, then one is known as a person of steady wisdom. So when one has given up all of the desires of the mind and delights in the self, by the self, that is by the mind in the self, then one is known as a sthita prajna, a person of steady wisdom. So Swami Nirvanananda, the great disciple of Swami Brahmananda, he had been an attendant of Swami Brahmananda. And Swami Brahmananda, when he was passing away, Rakal Maharaj, or also known as Raja Maharaj, when he was passing away, then he called his disciples to him and blessed each one of them. And so when he called Swami Nirvanananda to his bedside, he said that you have served me very well, and I bless you, but I am a penniless sadhu. What can I give you? But I bless you that you have the knowledge of Brahman in this very life. So what a tremendous blessing from a saint like Swami Brahmananda. I bless you that you have the knowledge of Brahman in this very life, not in your next life or in a nearby life, but in this life that you attain to the knowledge of Brahman. So when I was living in India back in the 70s, one of the monks went to Swami Nirvanananda and said, Maharaj, Swami Brahmananda blessed you and said that may you have the knowledge of Brahman in this very life. Have you had the knowledge of Brahman? So Swami Nirvanananda said, by the grace of Swami Brahmananda, by the grace of Sri Ramakrishna, the Holy Mother, and Swamiji, not a single desire arises within my mind. And so the monk says, but Maharaj, does that mean the knowledge of Brahman? Have you had the knowledge of Brahman? So again, he said, by the grace of Swami Brahmananda, Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Swamiji, not a single desire arises within my mind. And so again, the Swami asked the same thing, and again, the Swami said the same thing. But from the Gita, we know that yes, that happens only with the knowledge of Brahman. Without the knowledge of Brahman, that's not possible. So not a single desire would arise within his mind. Ramana Maharshi used to say, the great Ramana Maharshi, who's also a knower of Brahman, he used to say that the difference between a knower of Brahman and an ordinary person is that no sankalpa arises within the mind of the jnani, the person of the highest attainment. Sankalpa means no intention, that I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. So that includes a desire. I want this, I want that, I'm going to get this, I'm going to do that. Those ideas have vanished forever. And so Swami Nirvanananda was in that state. So here, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan. Hey partha, yada sarvan manogatan kaman prajahati. When one has given up all desires of the mind, sarvan, all kaman, desires, manogatan, of the mind, and when one is fully satisfied in the self, with the self, then one is known as a sthita prajna. So that Swami Nirvananandaji was that. And he was that because he had the knowledge of Brahman. Otherwise, there's no way to attain to that state. So this is a very beautiful introduction to the subject of the sthita prajna. And now he begins to say how such a person behaves. So this first part is a answer to the first part of the question. What is a sthita prajna? So the first part of the question in verse 54 was, what is the definition of a sthita prajna? And so here he says that this is a sthita prajna. This is the way that you know a sthita prajna. And so let's take another verse, 56. He says, Dukeshvanu dvignamana sukeshu vigataspriha vitaraga bhaya krodha sthita dhir muniruchyate. So dukeshu anudvignamana. in all miseries, in all situations of suffering, dukeshu, anudvignamana, he's unperturbed. His mind is unperturbed in all experiences of suffering. Sukeshu vigatasprihaha, and in all experiences of happiness and pleasure, his mind is without attachment. He's free from desire. Vigata, gone with spriha, desire. So all of his desires are gone in the midst of happiness. So one whose mind is unperturbed in all miseries, and whose mind is free from desire in the midst of all pleasant experiences. Vita raga bhaya krodha, who is free from raga, that is attachment, bhaya, fear, and krodha, anger. The three pashas, the great bondages of attachment, fear, and anger. So anger here includes dvesha, that is a dislike. So like and dislike and fear. These are the three basic lower emotions, the basic emotional responses of the animal man. That is, we are drawn to that which is pleasurable. We don't like that which is unpleasurable, and we're afraid of anything which threatens us. So we're drawn towards, we push against that which we don't like, and we run away from that which causes us fear. So those are the three most basic responses of the negative emotions. All of the others, like jealousy and envy, they are combinations of these factors. But the three basic ones are attraction, repulsion, and running away out of fear. So, Stita Dhir Muni Ruchate, one who has these qualities is known as one of steady wisdom, Stita Dhi, a person of steady wisdom. So it asked, how does such a person sit? How do they speak? How do they walk, etc.? So we're beginning to get an answer to that here. So he is unperturbed in the midst of misery and has no desire in the midst of pleasures. So that gives a sign, an indication, I should say, of the nature of the behavior of such a one. Unperturbed in all circumstances and free from desire in the midst of pleasures, and who is free from attraction and anger and fear. Those negative emotions have gone. And that's why the mind is unperturbed in the midst of miseries and steady in the midst of pleasures as well. The mind is unperturbed in both because they are vita raga bhaya krodha, because they are devoid of attraction, of anger, and fear. And so such a one is known as a stita dhi, the one of steady wisdom. And let's take one more verse, 57. Yas sarvatran abhisnehas tattat prapya shubha shubham nabhinandati nadveshti tasya prajna pratishtita. So yas sarvatran abhisneha tattat prapya shubha shubham nabhinandati nadveshti tasya prajna pratishtita. So taking the last tasya prajna pratishtita first, his wisdom is steady, who sarvatran abhisneha tattat prapya shubha shubham, who is free from affection. Sarvatra anabhisneha tattat prapya shubha shubham. He who is free from affection everywhere, and who, getting whatever good or evil, neither welcomes the nabhinandati nadveshti, neither welcomes nor hates them, such a one has steady wisdom. So the running translation is, he who is free from affection everywhere. Ya sarvatra anabhisneha, he who is free from affection everywhere, and who, getting whatever good or evil, neither welcomes nor hates them. That is the rest of that line and the beginning of the next, which is abhisnehas tattat prapya, having attained to whatever, shubha shubham, good or bad, Na abhinandati, na abhinandati, doesn't delight, na dveshti, nor hate. Such a one has steady wisdom. So again, he who is free from affection everywhere, and who, getting whatever good or evil, neither welcomes nor hates them, has steady wisdom. So again, that's the person of steady wisdom who is unaffected by the experiences of life. How do they do that? How is it that one can be unaffected by the experiences of life? That we can attain to perfectly only when we have attained to self-realization. Because then we have attained to complete fulfillment in reality, and everything else is seen as just a shadow. And we know that I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, so whatever the body experiences, whatever the mind experiences, that is not me, and I don't care. It doesn't affect me, because I know myself and I'm established in that. These are just shadows that are going on. To us, these experiences of good and bad are so terribly real because it's all that we know. Our sense of reality is in this world. This world is what is real to us. And so whatever happens here is intensely real to us. And so we take it so seriously because this is all that we know. But if we knew the infinite self and saw this whole world as just a shadow that's floating in, like a mist floating in the brilliant light of the self, then nothing here would affect us. So what are we to do with a verse like this? So for us, the practice is to imitate. That is, to realize that this person, the Stita Prajna, is one of realization. That's what we want. And so we try to be steady in the midst of our experiences, knowing that we won't attain perfect success until we actually know the self, and then everything becomes spontaneous and easy. There's no effort then. But for us, there's effort involved. Let me try to be even-minded in the midst of all of my experiences, knowing that that's what I should be. So it's a calculus of imitation, a calculus of approaching to an infinite limit as closer and closer and closer and closer as we get. But once we attain to self-realization, there's no more calculus involved. Then we have become that which before was the limit of the infinite which we were trying to approach. Once we become the infinite, then the calculus of approach, that goes away. We are that. But for us, it's the calculus of approaching that, that infinite limit. So we try to become steady in the midst of all of our experiences. So isn't that imagination? Isn't that imitation? No. No, we gradually become more and more steady in the midst of all of our experiences. So it begins by trying, but as we go forward, we find that, yes, now I see that there's nothing to get upset about. Nothing to get upset about. Why should I get upset about anything? Let me experience that which comes, deal with it the best I can, but why should I allow it to upset, to disturb the peace of my mind? So yes, sometimes, once in a while, we have a big thing happen, which is beyond our control. We just overcome with the sadness or whatever, if we lose a loved one or whatever, or someone close to us is very ill and we're concerned about them. Yes, that's going to be beyond our control. And that's okay, that's a human experience. Because we love them, of course, we're going to be affected. But in general, we begin to find that no, I'm unaffected by the experiences of life. And even when something big happens, like the death of someone we love or the illness of someone that we love, we find that I'm able to maintain an equanimity enough so that I can deal with the situation, so that I can deal with that which I need to do. So even in those big circumstances, we get a larger amount of equanimity, not because of the absence of love, but because of our sense of mind and self become bigger and bigger. We can contain more and more. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, that when an elephant enters into a small pool, it creates havoc. It splashes all of the water out of the pool. But when the ocean enters in, when the elephant enters into the ocean, it makes no difference to the ocean. So we want to become the ocean. We want to become like the ocean so that we are unperturbed by anything. So with that, I will end here.